I was staring at my Honda Accord hood buried so deep in snow I thought the car had joined a monastery. When it hit me, the universe had just handed me the most deliciously ironic scandal of my career. My name is Harrison Novak, and I spend my days as an insurance adjuster reading the fine print of other people's disasters for a living. Property claims, structural failures, the kinds of ugly, boring paperwork that somehow keeps the world from falling apart. So, when the organization that literally buried my car was also the one whose insurance policy I'd been evaluating for 2 weeks, well, you can see why this story refuses to be small. I moved into Meadowbrook Heights 4 months after a divorce, looking for quiet, for something smaller that felt like mine. The development sold itself as reasonable, tidy lawns, paint colors within polite limits, and HOA that promised calm. I read the bylaws the night I closed the way an adjuster reads a contract, carefully, suspiciously hunting for the small clauses that blow up your life. It said what most things say during declared snow emergencies: don't park on the street. Driveways were permitted. Simple until someone decided to make it interesting. That February morning was biblical snow piling so fast the world looked like a paused movie. State police had a travel ban across the county. I had my Accord tucked in the driveway like a law-abiding citizen. At 8:30 I heard a mechanical roar, and in the time it took to swallow a lukewarm coffee, a commercial plow branded in crisp blue letters with Meadowbrook Heights, HOA, barreled into my driveway and shoved enough compacted snow into a sideways avalanche to swallow my passenger side doors whole. My car didn't get a conversation, it got buried. I ran out in slippers, coffee sloshing, lungs burning, waving at a truck that kept going like I was a polite hallucination. I documented everything with the professional reflex photos, timestamps, and narration into my phone, like I was prepping an exhibit. Then the HOA president shows up, Deborah Winters, exactly the type of person you'd see in a casting call for Petty Power incarnate, designer coat, immaculate hair, the expression of someone who thinks bylaws are holy writ and empathy is optional. She tells me I'm in violation, that in a snow emergency cars must be stored in garages, and that the HOA's contractor corrected the hazard. Corrected, she says, like a bulldozer correcting a typo. My jaw tightened, which, for an adjuster, means the fun part begins. I explained calmly, I read the bylaws, driveways are allowed. Her response, a fine, a threat to lien my property if I didn't pay. Then the part of the script that made my blood slow and my brain speed up, the realization I've been evaluating this HOA's liability policy for weeks. Their file sits on my desk. Their renewal is in March. Summit Ridge, my company, is deciding whether to keep them insured. Suddenly, the personal and the professional braided into something combustible. I called my supervisor, I called my attorney friend Jake, who makes a living representing homeowners against overreaching boards and who, bless him, had warned me about living in a planned community. I called my own insurer to report the damage because rules exist for paperwork and for leverage. Meanwhile, the HOA president huffed off, certain her tiny tyrannies had prevailed. She didn't count on a few things that I document compulsively that neighbors notice and that drunken little empires often rely on people's ignorance. Neighbors came out. Frank Pearson, retired military and impossible to intimidate, told me he saw the plow aim at my car like it was target practice. Sarah and Tom Henderson from down the street, new parents, watched their RAV4 get the same treatment. Rachel Kim, an ER nurse, was at work and found out her Subaru had been sacrificed to the great white god. She cried, because a car isn't just chrome and metal when you rely on it for work. A contractor, Pedro, showed up and estimated more than I wanted to hear, 10 to 15,000, maybe more, if the frame was bent. The whole block looked like a municipal art installation titled HOA Hubris. And then the twist: the contractor who drove the plow, a gruff guy named Dennis Kowalski, called me. He put the call on speaker and, with more guilt than bravado, admitted Deborah had called him at 5 in the morning and told him to clear driveways, to push the snow wherever necessary, because residents were obstructing snow removal. Not the exact words "plow cars," but close enough. He agreed to give a written statement if I coaxed him because he didn't want to get fired. Suddenly, this wasn't a he said, she said. We had a chain of commands and admissions, and the smell of liability got thicker. 2 things happen in cases like this. Facts consolidate and systems move. I recused myself from the policy assessment conflict of interest, and Jake drafted a demand letter. The HOA tried to finesse the situation, offering to waive the fine if I stopped talking to my neighbors, which is HOA. Doublespeak for, "We'll bribe you to stop reporting." I told them no. I wanted the insurance to pay for repairs, and I wanted an end to threats. Deborah's response was classical menace, the thinly veiled promise that an HOA board that controls fines and certificates can make life miserable. I recorded that too. Pennsylvania's one-party consent made me a lucky man with a very full phone. Summit Ridge did their job, and here's where karma wears a suit. When senior adjusters looked at the HOA's claim history, they saw a pattern: slip and fall payouts, odd property damages, harassment complaints, and other incidents where the board acted like a sovereign. Non-renewal followed. Our recommendation to drop them as a client wasn't personal, it was actuarial, but the timing felt delicious. Insurance is democracy in small print. If you behave recklessly, the market eventually makes you pay. Mediation followed because even petty monarchs prefer to avoid public humiliation. The HOA's lawyer showed up in a courthouse-paneled office, all professional calm, but the cards were stacked against Deborah. Recorded admissions, witness statements, contractor emails, and a file from my own employer showing a chronology of bad decisions. Finch, the HOA's lawyer, told her the obvious: settle or fight and lose more. The numbers added up: roughly $53,000 across 4 cars, and ancillary costs, a sum within policy limits, but far beyond Deborah's appetite for pride. The HOA's insurance would cover it, but not before the board felt the sting of consequences, non-renewal notices, a dented reserve fund, and the political fallout of a community that suddenly woke up. This story could have ended there. Repairs and apology, maybe an HOA memo about better contractor vetting. But the thing about power is that it never retreats without a fight. And the thing about community is that anger can turn into action. Frank spearheaded a recall petition. Within a week, enough homeowners signed to force a special election. The meeting where the truth came out felt a little like theater. The room packed, residents reading aloud emails, a treasurer sweating, a president red-faced. And when the votes were cast, the old board was swept out like a bad habit. Deborah Winters got 32 votes. Helen Foster, a retired principal who ran on competence and decency, got 164. There's a satisfying hum in seeing a small tyranny toppled by the slow, clumsy machinery of civic process. The insurance claims were paid. Pedro fixed my Accord like it had never been crushed. The community hired a new management firm, the board instituted transparency, and mercifully the new snowplow drivers kept to the streets. Dennis called me months later at a gas station, eyes down, said he'd been offered his job back under the new management and promised he'd never ignore what felt wrong again. He apologized. That counts for something, not everything, but enough. If there's a moral here, and I promise I'm not preaching, it's this: knowledge is a form of defense. I could have paid the fine, swallowed the repair costs, and moved on, and maybe the HOA would still be running roughshod over people who don't read contracts for breakfast. But because I knew the law and how insurance works, because I documented and spoke up and didn't let intimidation close my mouth, the outcome was different. That's messy and not romantic, but it's real systems change when enough people insist they should. And the insurance market, cold and impersonal, turned out to be a tool for enforcing better governance. It also taught me about humility. I'd moved to Meadowbrook Heights wanting peace, and the fight cost energy I didn't plan on spending. But watching neighbors rediscover civic muscle, seeing a community elect people who actually listen, those were the rewards. My involvement nudged me into public education. I volunteered to give talks at the library about homeowner rights and insurance basics, because if one man's annoyance can become a lesson for many, the next time someone tries to weaponize ignorance, fewer people will fall for it. So how does it end? My Accord sits in my driveway under a light dusting of winter, fixed and gleaming a small flag of victory. The HOA carries a scar and a different board. The insurance company made a market decision that forced better practices. And Deborah Winters, well, she learned what it's like when your power meets paperwork. Justice in this little suburban drama was incremental and imperfect, but it landed. Now, I want to ask you, and I mean this seriously, how much should we tolerate in the name of community standards? When does enforcing rules become abuse of power, and when is pushback just sour grapes? Tell me your story. Have you ever been bullied by a board, a supervisor, a neighbor who thinks rules are a crown? Drop it in the comments, share what happened. And if you've got an HOA horror story or a victory you're proud of, tell us, did you fight, fold, or find a different way? If this pushed you to think twice about the quiet things that can quietly ruin lives, share this video. Help someone else learn what I had to learn the hard way.